You think a man like me can't make a difference? Jack Thompson asked, his voice low but carrying a weight only a lifetime of struggles could forge. The young man scoffed, glancing over Jack with a mix of mockery and indifference. You? Now. You're just some old guy stuck in the past. You should be resting, not trying to play hero. Jack didn't flinch. At 70 years old, he had heard worse, much worse. His hands, scarred from battles fought long ago, gripped the weathered leather strap of his duffel bag as he looked at the run-down neighborhood around him. The concrete cracked underfoot, the paint on the nearby buildings peeling, the lives of kids being wasted on streets filled with crime, aimlessness, and despair. It wasn't supposed to be this way. Not after everything he'd fought for. He had promised himself he would do something for them, even if it meant breaking through the walls of apathy that surrounded him. So, Jack set to work. Every day, he walked through the neighborhood, collecting scraps of equipment, searching for old boxing gear, and slowly, quietly, building a gym for the kids. A place where they could learn discipline, focus, and perhaps find a way out of the darkness. It was a slow, grueling process. Most of the neighborhood ignored him, dismissed him as just another relic of a bygone era. But Jack didn't care. He worked in silence, his back aching and his hands worn, but his resolve unshaken. As he gathered the last pieces of equipment, a punching bag here, a few worn-out gloves there, the local kids began to notice. At first, they stopped to watch him, skeptical and disinterested. Some of them threw a few jabs at the bag in mockery. They didn't see the point. But as the days passed, they started to return. Not because they believed in him, not yet. But because they needed something, anything, to fill the emptiness inside. And Jack was there. Day after day, he showed up, patient and steady, teaching them how to throw a punch, how to stand tall, how to fight for something more than just survival. Word spread slowly at first, but it did spread. One by one, the kids started showing up, eager to learn. Jack never asked for a dime. It wasn't about money, it wasn't about recognition. It was about giving them something they could hold onto, a sense of purpose. As the gym grew, so did the respect he earned. Not from all of them, but from enough to make a difference. They started to see Jack for what he really was, a man who had fought for his country, who had sacrificed everything, and who now wanted to make sure that the future of these kids didn't fall through the cracks like so many before them. And then, one day, as Jack was sweeping the floor of the gym, a familiar face appeared in the doorway. Sarah, a local teacher who had seen the kids' transformation, walked in with a smile. She looked at him with a newfound respect. "I've been hearing a lot about you," she said, her voice warm. "You're changing things around here. They're talking about it at school." Jack didn't respond right away. He just nodded, the faintest smile crossing his lips. It wasn't about the recognition. It was about the fact that something had changed. The gym wasn't just a place to train. It was a symbol of resilience, of hope, and of the power of one man's determination to make a difference. Jack Thompson stepped into the gym that morning, the hum of the old fluorescent lights overhead his only company. It had been a week since Sarah had come by, and the kids had started showing up in numbers. They weren't all there for boxing, not at first. They came because the gym was a place to get away from the chaos of their lives, to escape the streets for just a few hours. But Jack didn't mind. Every punch they threw, every minute they spent learning, was a victory in itself. The gym wasn't about winning trophies or belts, it was about teaching them to fight for something better than what they had. As he wiped the dust from one of the old punching bags, a familiar voice cut through the stillness. "You're making them stronger, you know that." Sarah walked in, a bag of supplies in her hands. She smiled at him, her eyes full of admiration. "It's not just the kids who are changing. This place is different now." Jack nodded without saying anything, but his heart swelled at her words. He'd never needed anyone's approval, but hearing it from her, someone who had seen the difference firsthand, felt good. The kids were different now. Their postures were straighter. Their movements more purposeful. The wild, aimless energy they once carried had transformed into focus. It wasn't just boxing they were learning, it was self-respect, discipline, and determination. But as much as Jack had given to them, he knew they had given something back to him as well. The gym had reignited a part of him that had been dormant for too long. He wasn't just a caged soldier anymore, buried under memories of war. He was a man with a purpose again, a man who could still make a difference. Sarah set the bag down and walked toward him, her gaze softening. "I've been hearing a lot of talk in town," she said, pausing for a moment before continuing. "The kids talk about you like you're a hero. They're not just learning boxing. They're learning what it means to stand tall. They're learning how to fight for something that matters." Jack didn't know what to say. The idea that the kids saw him as a hero felt foreign, but it didn't surprise him. He had always believed in leading by example, in showing them that a life of dignity could be lived, no matter the odds. Just then, one of the kids, a young boy named Marcus, walked up to Jack. His eyes were wide with respect, a hesitant smile on his face. "Hey, Jack! I just wanted to say thanks. My mom, she's different now. She says I'm doing better. She's happy I'm here." The words hit Jack like a wave. The gym, this little refuge he had built from nothing, was helping to change lives. Marcus wasn't just learning to punch. He was learning how to fight for himself, how to hold his head up high in a world that didn't always care. The other kids started to gather around, looking up to Jack in a way that made his heart swell. The once scorned veteran was now the pillar of something greater than himself. The small victories, like Marcus's smile, like the way the kids held their heads higher, were enough. They had started to believe in themselves, and that was the real win. Jack smiled and looked at Sarah, who was watching him with a proud, quiet gaze. The work wasn't done yet. There was still more to be built, more lives to be touched. But in this moment, as the kids sparred and laughed around him, Jack knew he had already won. The gym was quieter than usual that morning, the air thick with anticipation. Jack stood by the ropes, watching the kids warm up. There was a certain energy in the room now, one that wasn't there when he first started. The sense of purpose, the shared determination, they were no longer just learning how to box. They were learning how to fight for their futures. Sarah had brought some of her students in to volunteer that day, helping with the kids' drills. As Jack observed, he could see the change in them. Their punches were sharper, their stances steadier. There was no longer the awkward hesitation in their movements, only focus and discipline. He felt a hand on his shoulder, and turned to see Sarah standing beside him, a small smile on her face. "You've done it, Jack," she said, her voice filled with pride. "They're not just showing up anymore. They're showing up to learn, to grow. They look up to you." Jack grunted, not used to receiving such praise. He had never cared for recognition. It wasn't why he did what he did. He looked over at the kids again, watching as one of them, a teenager named Cody, helped a younger kid adjust his gloves. Cody had been one of the hardest to reach at first. He was tough, defensive, and didn't believe in anything. But now, Jack could see the change. Cody wasn't just throwing punches. He was teaching, guiding the others, showing them what he had learned. Jack felt a deep sense of satisfaction, but it was quiet. He had always been a man of action, not words. As the session went on, Jack noticed the kids weren't just hitting bags or sparring. They were talking to each other, about their hopes, their struggles, their dreams. The gym had become more than just a place to train, it had become a community. A safe space for these kids who had nothing else. As the last bell rang, signaling the end of the day's session, Jack watched as the kids began to gather their things. There was no rushing out the door, no frantic scramble to get away. They lingered, chatting and laughing with one another, reluctant to leave. Jack's heart swelled. They had built something here, something that was bigger than boxing, bigger than him. It was a place where they could find respect, discipline, and a sense of belonging. He looked up at Sarah, who was standing by the door, watching the kids with a proud smile. "You're right," Jack said, his voice low but steady. "They're not just learning to fight. They're learning to live. Sarah nodded, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. There was nothing more to say. They both knew what this meant. The gym wasn't just a project anymore. It was a part of who they were, a testament to the power of determination, and the belief that it was never too late to make a difference. Jack felt a hand on his shoulder again, and this time, he didn't shrug it off. It was Cody, the teenager who had come so far, standing beside him with a look of gratitude. "Thanks, Jack," Cody said, his voice quiet but sincere. Jack looked down at the boy, nodding slowly. "You've earned it, Cody. Keep fighting." And for the first time in years, Jack felt the weight of his past and present come together in a way that made sense. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a teacher, a mentor, a guide. And he had given these kids a chance to become something more. As he walked out of the gym that night, the door closing softly behind him, Jack knew one thing for sure: this was only the beginning. It had been months since the gym had opened its doors, and Jack Thompson stood at the edge of the ring, watching the kids as they worked through their drills. The once silent, almost empty gym had transformed into a place full of life. The sounds of gloves hitting bags, feet shuffling on the mats, and the hum of conversation filled the air. Jack had done more than just build a boxing gym. He had built a family. As the kids sparred, laughing and challenging one another, Jack couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride. They were no longer the lost, angry kids that had wandered into his gym a few months ago. They were stronger, not just in their bodies but in their minds. And it wasn't just the physical training that had made a difference. It was the discipline, the respect for each other, and the way they carried themselves now. They stood taller, not just because they were growing, but because they had learned to believe in themselves. Sarah had been right all along. The gym was more than just boxing. It was a place where these kids could find a sense of belonging. "Hey, Jack," a voice called out from across the room. Jack turned to see Cody walking over, a grin on his face. "What's up?" Jack asked, wiping the sweat from his forehead with a towel. "I just wanted to thank you again," Cody said, his voice sincere. "I don't know where I'd be without this place." Jack smiled. "You've come a long way, Cody." Cody nodded, his eyes bright with a newfound determination. "Yeah, I'm not just here to box anymore. I'm here to prove that I can do something with my life." Jack gave him a pat on the back, his heart swelling with pride. "That's what I like to hear. You've got the fight in you, Cody. Never forget that." As the session came to a close, Jack gathered the kids together for a quick talk. He looked around at their faces, all of them different, but all with the same fire in their eyes. "I'm proud of each and every one of you," Jack began, his voice steady and firm. "You've all put in the work. You've earned your respect, not just from me, but from each other. And that's what this is about. It's not just about being the best boxer. It's about being the best version of yourself." The kids nodded, their faces serious. "But remember," Jack continued, "this gym isn't just a place to train. It's a place where you hold each other up. You help one another. You fight together, not just in the ring, but in life." As Jack finished speaking, a few of the kids spoke up, thanking him again, but it wasn't just out of politeness. They meant it. They knew that Jack had given them something more than just boxing lessons. He had given them a chance. And that was more than any of them had ever expected. The days passed, and the gym continued to grow. It wasn't just the kids from the neighborhood now. Word had spread, and soon, kids from surrounding areas began showing up. They wanted to be a part of what was happening here. Jack knew that the gym had become something special. It was no longer just about him. It was about all of them, working together, striving for something greater than themselves. The journey wasn't over, but Jack knew one thing for sure: it had already been worth it. The gym had become a second home for the kids, a place where they could escape from their problems and find something meaningful to focus on. Jack stood in the middle of the room, watching them move with confidence, their punches sharper, their movement smoother. The transformation was undeniable. They weren't the same kids who had walked through those doors months ago. They were stronger, not just in their bodies, but in their minds. They had learned to fight, not just in the ring, but in life. Jack felt a deep sense of pride as he observed them. This was what he had worked for. Not the praise, not the recognition, but seeing them grow, seeing them become something more than they thought they could be. As the kids finished their drills, Sarah walked over to Jack, her eyes filled with admiration. "They're different now," she said softly, watching the kids chat and laugh with one another. "You've done more for them than you know." Jack nodded, but said nothing. He wasn't one for words. He had always believed in actions, not speeches. But as he looked around at the kids, at the smiles on their faces, he knew Sarah was right. They had found something here, something they hadn't expected. They had found hope. "Hey, Jack," Cody said, walking over with a hesitant smile on his face. "I've been thinking about my future." Jack looked at him, waiting for him to continue. "I'm not sure what I want to do yet," Cody said, his voice serious, "but I know it's going to be something better than what I had before. I'm not going back to that life." Jack's heart swelled with pride. Cody had come a long way. He wasn't the angry, lost kid who had walked into the gym months ago. He was someone who believed in himself, someone who had a future. "You're on the right track, Cody," Jack said, his voice steady. "Just keep pushing forward. You've got what it takes." Cody smiled, nodding. "Thanks, Jack. I mean it." As the weeks went by, the gym continued to thrive. The kids showed up every day, eager to train, eager to improve. It wasn't just about boxing anymore. It was about finding a sense of purpose, about learning to believe in themselves, and about proving to the world that they weren't just a product of their circumstances. Jack watched them grow, each one finding their own path, but always carrying with them the lessons they had learned in the gym. One evening, as Jack locked up the gym and prepared to leave, Sarah came up to him again. "You've done something incredible here," she said, her voice full of emotion. "You've changed their lives." Jack shrugged, not comfortable with the praise. "They've changed their own lives," he said, his voice humble. "I just gave them a place to start." Sarah smiled at him, a look of deep respect in her eyes. "You gave them more than that. You gave them hope." Jack didn't respond, but inside, he knew she was right. He hadn't just built a gym. He had built a foundation for their future. And that was more than he could have ever asked for. The gym had become more than just a place to train, it had become a symbol of what was possible when people came together, when they believed in something bigger than themselves. Jack Thompson sat in the corner, watching the kids as they sparred. His eyes moved from one face to the next, noting the quiet focus, the discipline in their movements. They had come so far, and Jack had been there every step of the way, not just as a trainer but as a mentor, a father figure for some, a guiding hand for others. He had built this place, but it was the kids who had truly made it what it was. They were learning to fight, but more importantly, they were learning to live. As the last bell rang, signaling the end of the session, Jack stood up and stretched his stiff muscles. The kids were gathering their things, talking and laughing amongst themselves. They were different now. They weren't the same kids who had wandered in months ago, looking for something, anything, to fill the emptiness inside them. They were stronger, more confident, and they had learned what it meant to fight for themselves. One of the kids, a boy named Ethan, walked over to Jack. His face was serious, but there was something in his eyes, something Jack had seen in the others, a spark of understanding. "Jack," Ethan said, "I wanted to thank you for everything." Jack raised an eyebrow, surprised by the gratitude. "You've helped me more than you know," Ethan continued. "I was about to drop out of school, but now I'm staying. I want to do something with my life. I don't want to be like everyone else." Jack smiled, his heart swelling with pride. Ethan had come a long way. He had started out as one of the kids who didn't believe in anything, and now he was standing here, telling Jack that he had found something worth fighting for. "You're making the right choice, Ethan," Jack said, his voice steady. This gym, this place, it's not just about boxing. It's about finding your own path. You've got the strength to walk it. Ethan nodded, a determined look in his eyes. I'm going to make you proud, Jack. Jack watched as Ethan walked away, rejoining the others. He knew that Ethan wasn't just saying words. The fire in his eyes told Jack that this was more than just a promise. This was a turning point in his life. The gym had done more than teach boxing, it had given these kids the tools they needed to fight for their futures. Jack walked out of the gym, his steps slow but steady. The night air was cool, and for the first time in a long while, Jack felt at peace. The work wasn't done, and he knew there was more to be done. There would always be more to do. But as he looked back at the gym, the sounds of laughter and conversation echoing inside, Jack knew one thing for sure. He had made a difference. He had given these kids something that no one else had. He had given them hope. Jack stood at the doorway of the gym, his eyes scanning the faces of the kids as they filtered out after another intense session. The place had become more than just a gym, it had become their refuge, their safe space. It was where they could escape from the harsh realities of life and find strength in each other. It was where they could learn to fight, but more importantly, it was where they learned to live. Sarah walked up beside him, her steps soft but purposeful. She had been there from the beginning, helping Jack build the gym, and now, she had become more than just a supporter, she had become a part of the fabric that held everything together. You've really done something here, Jack, she said, her voice filled with admiration. They're different now. They don't just see you as the old guy who runs the gym anymore. They see you as a leader. A mentor. Jack nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He wasn't used to the attention, but he couldn't deny the truth in her words. The kids had changed. They were no longer the lost souls who wandered in, searching for something to hold on to. They had found it, here, in the gym, in each other. They had found their purpose. Jack turned back to look at the kids, who were now gathered outside, talking and laughing together. Some were heading home, others were staying behind to help clean up, but all of them were different. They were stronger, not just physically, but mentally. They had learned discipline, respect, and the value of hard work. They had learned that they could achieve more than they ever thought possible. He felt a hand on his shoulder, and when he turned, he saw Cody standing there, his face serious. I just wanted to thank you again, Jack, Cody said, his voice steady. You've changed my life. I never thought I'd get to this point. I didn't think I had it in me. Jack smiled and placed a hand on Cody's shoulder. You've always had it in you, Cody. I just helped you see it. You've done the hard work. You've earned it. Cody nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude. I'm not going back to the streets, Jack. I'm going to college. I'm going to make something of myself. Jack's heart swelled with pride. He had seen Cody struggle, seen him doubt himself, but now, standing before him, Cody had the confidence of someone who knew exactly what he wanted. That's what I like to hear, Jack said, his voice full of warmth. You've got a bright future ahead of you. Just keep pushing forward. As Cody walked away, Jack's thoughts drifted back to the first day he had opened the gym. He had been nervous, unsure of whether anyone would show up, let alone stick around. But now, as he looked at the kids, the hard work, the late nights, the moments of doubt, it had all been worth it. He had given them something they didn't have before, a chance. A chance to build something better, a chance to change their lives. And he had given them that, not with a speech or a grand gesture, but with simple actions. With every punch thrown, every drill completed, every lesson taught, he had shown them that they could do more than they ever thought possible. The gym wasn't just a place to train, it was a place to grow, to become the best version of themselves. And that, Jack realized, was the greatest victory of all. As the months passed, the gym became more than just a place to train, it became the heartbeat of the community. Jack watched the kids grow in ways he had never imagined. They were no longer the same group of troubled youth who had stumbled through the doors at the start. Now, they were a team, united by something stronger than their shared struggles. They were united by their will to fight for their future. Every day, more and more kids came, drawn by the reputation of the gym and the changes they saw in the others. Jack wasn't just training boxers anymore, he was building leaders, one lesson at a time. He found himself mentoring not only the kids who were showing promise in the ring but also the ones who were struggling the most. There was Cody, who had become a role model for the younger kids, always encouraging them, always showing them that change was possible. Then there was Marcus, the quiet kid who had kept to himself at first, now thriving, confident in a way Jack hadn't thought possible. The change wasn't just physical. They were finding themselves, finding their purpose. One evening, as the gym was winding down, Jack sat on the bench, watching the kids finish up their final drills. His body ached from the long days of hard work, but his heart felt full. The door opened, and Sarah stepped in, her usual warm smile lighting up the room. She had become Jack's right hand, helping run the gym, organizing events, and most importantly, believing in the vision when no one else did. "I talked to the local community center today," Sarah said, walking over to Jack. "They're interested in what we're doing here. They want to partner with us to help even more kids." Jack raised an eyebrow, a look of surprise on his face. "That's great. But how are we going to manage?" "They're offering to help with funding and outreach," Sarah continued. "They see what's happening here. They want to be a part of it." Jack leaned back, processing the offer. He had always been wary of outside help, but the gym was growing faster than he could manage on his own. This partnership could be the key to expanding the program, reaching even more kids who needed a place like this. "We'll have to stay true to what we've built," Jack said, his voice steady. "We can't lose what makes this place special. It's not just the boxing. It's the community, the sense of belonging." Sarah nodded. "Of course. We'll make sure it stays true to the heart of it." As the conversation ended, Jack stood up, stretching his aching muscles. He walked over to the ring, the ropes familiar under his hands. He watched as the last of the kids trickled out of the gym, some heading home, some going to the nearby diner to grab a bite. He had made a difference in their lives, and they had made a difference in his. He wasn't the same man who had walked into this community months ago. He had found his purpose, and in doing so, he had helped others find theirs. Jack looked at the empty gym, the quiet hum of the lights above him the only sound in the room. The work wasn't done, and he knew it never would be. But he had started something here, something that was growing every day. And as long as there were kids walking through that door, there was work to be done. Jack smiled to himself as he turned off the lights and closed the door behind him. The gym wasn't just a place to train, it was a beacon for hope, and he had built it with his own two hands. The day had finally come. The gym was packed with kids, their energy filling the room as they prepared for their first official tournament. Jack stood at the back, watching the chaos with a sense of quiet pride. It was hard to believe how far they had come. From the early days of doubt and uncertainty to this, an event where the kids weren't just competing for a prize, but for something much more valuable, their self-respect, their confidence, their future. Cody was pacing nervously in the corner, his gloves on, eyes scanning the room. Jack walked over to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've got this, Cody," Jack said, his voice calm but firm. "Remember what we've been working on. It's not about winning. It's about showing who you've become." Cody nodded, his jaw tightening with determination. "I know, Jack. I'm ready." Jack smiled. The kid had come a long way. Just a few months ago, he had been one of the most skeptical, the one who questioned everything, unsure if he even belonged here. But now, he was standing tall, ready to fight for something bigger than himself. As the tournament began, the kids faced off one by one, some with the nerves of first-timers, others with the quiet confidence of those who had learned what it meant to be prepared. Jack kept his eyes on them, offering a silent prayer that they would see this for what it truly was, a chance to prove not just their skills, but their character. The tournament wasn't easy. The kids faced tough opponents, challenges they hadn't expected, but with every round, they grew stronger. They supported one another, encouraged each other, and by the end of the day, it wasn't just about who had won or lost. It was about the respect they had earned from one another. As the last match ended, the gym was filled with cheers and applause. Jack watched as the kids gathered around, their faces sweaty but proud. They had given everything, and that was all that mattered. Cody walked over, a broad smile on his face. "I won, Jack," he said, his voice full of excitement. "But it's not just about that, right? It's about everything we've learned." Jack nodded. "You've learned what it takes to be a champion, Cody. Not just in the ring, but in life." Cody grinned, the weight of those words settling in. He had finally realized that the fight wasn't just about fists, it was about heart, about perseverance, and about never giving up. As the kids celebrated their victories and shared their stories of the day, Jack couldn't help but feel a deep sense of satisfaction. This was the moment he had worked for. Not the trophy, not the applause, but the knowledge that these kids, who had once walked in unsure of themselves, had now found their own strength. They weren't just survivors. They were fighters. And they had learned to fight for something worth living for. Jack stood back and took it all in. The gym was alive with energy, with hope, and with the promise of a better tomorrow. He had done more than build a gym. He had built a future for these kids. And as long as they kept fighting, as long as they kept pushing forward, he knew that future would be theirs.